On April 4th, 2019, Jamal Crawford would score 51 points off the bench for the Phoenix Suns against the Dallas Mavericks. That was the last time since 2008 that he had scored 50 points in a game. And that was also his last full season in the league. He would play one more year technically for the Brooklyn Nets the following year, but he only played one game where he played 6 minutes. So that was his last official year, and he scored 50 points off the bench. Why is that? Because sometimes in the NBA, you have a player that is very, very skilled, but maybe they don't fit inside a team's concept or what their scheme is. And that's what I want to talk about today on State of the Association. As always, I'm your host, Nash Roberts. Currently, you might see it with a guy like Cam Thomas. He got more playing time this year. But in years past, he would have streaks. Where he's scoring 40 points a night. And people were saying, hey, why don't we get this guy like genuine starter minutes? Why is he logging 40 points one game and the next he doesn't play? And that's just as a result of Cam Thomas's play style. He's going to get his shots up regardless of what you do with him. He comes off the bench, he's going to get shots up. He starts, he's going to get some shots up. But the thing about that is, it takes away opportunities from the other guys. And the Brooklyn, they don't have a lot of vets. All they have are young guys. So, yes, you can make an argument that you should be developing a guy like Cam Thomas. You can also just make the argument that there's other guys you need to develop as well. And Cam Thomas isn't known for passing that rock. So maybe you limit the games that he's out there a ton just by virtue of you've got other guys you want to focus on too and focus on their development. And you worry that Cam Thomas can hinder that. Well, I disagree. Because, if Brooklyn needs anything, it's a real shot creator, a guy who's going to get buckets up. He'll take 20 shots a night, regardless of if it's a good shot or not. He's throwing it up there and seeing if it goes in, That's especially how I felt before they traded away Mikal Bridges. That was a team that it just had a lot of role players, really had a lot of 3-and-D guys. And you get one star in there, one guy that's going to handle the rock. He's going to maybe pass it out a little bit more. And he's going to get shots up as well. He's going to be touching the ball in every possession. That would have been perfect for Brooklyn, in my opinion, because, oftentimes the offensive engines, they leave a lot to be desired on the defensive end. I see a guy like D'Angelo Russell. I love D'Lo, but he's not the best defender by any means. And, Luka Doncic on a higher level. Guys like that, they don't put all their effort in. Trae Young, they don't put all their effort in on the defense because they don't need to. Because hopefully, if you constructed their roster well, you're going to have guys that can take, that can hold them up and make them be a better team defender than they are individually just by virtue of the talent you have around them. But here's the issue when it comes to a guy like Cam Thomas, a guy like Bones Hyland. The problem with them is, yes, they might put up 20 shots a night. They're going to get their baskets. But at this current stage, it's not that efficient. And if you're going to be the guy the offense runs through and, the team builds around you to where that roster construction, it's a lot of role players, guys who are going to get out in the corner. They're going to be able to hit an open three, guys who are going to get boards, guys who are going to play defense. You need to have the offensive capability to be able to lead that team. And there's only a select few people in the world who can do that. And that's not a knock on a guy like Cam Thomas or Bones Hyland. Those are some of my favorite hoopers in the entire league. But ultimately, you don't trust them to lead your team to a chip. And with their play style, you need them to be that guy. And I don't know that they can be that guy. And that's where the issue arises. You can't scheme around them to much success. You can scheme around them, build a roster. But at the end of the day, in the NBA, we're all trying to win a championship and trying to be as profitable a business as possible because it's a business at the end of the day. And there's only a select few guys in the league who can be the number one option on a championship team. Even this past year, Jason Tatum, right? He's a stud. He's a top 10 player in the league. He wasn't conference finals MVP. He wasn't finals MVP. And, a lot of people disrespect Tatum, and there's a little bit of truth to that. But, just the thing ultimately is that he makes up for in other areas, though. Like, he doesn't need to be the number one scoring option on the team every night because he can do other things. He can defend pretty well. And, when he focuses on offense, maybe it takes away from that a little bit. But that team is just, in general, set up so well that it works. You can build around Jason Tatum. I think he's a really good example of who teams might look to build around as opposed to, just a pure bucket getter. That era is kind of long gone now, and those are some of my favorite players to watch, but it just doesn't lead to much success. Sure, I might not be the only one that likes to watch those guys. You might get some jersey sales, but, you're going to get more money from being in these playoff games, being in big playoff games, going to the conference finals, the finals, maybe even winning, right? And I don't know how possible that is with some of those guys. And you see it previously with someone like Lou Williams. Lou Williams is great, one of my all-time favorites. But he was relegated to a six-man role most of his career where he can just go out there and be a microwave scorer, be the top scorer on both teams on any given night. And that was perfect for him because that's his play style. And I think that's what the ceiling is for a guy like Cam Thomas or Bones Hyland because they play the same way. They're going to get their own shots up, and you're going to have to build a really good roster around them if you ever wanted to even have a chance to think about competing for a title. Ultimately, maybe you can't build a win around that guy, and that's okay. He can bring you a lot of value on the team, but you can't necessarily argue as much as I would like to sometimes that this is the guy to build around, to build a championship team, because sometimes that's just not the possibility. There's only a few people in the league who can do that. You look at a guy like Carmelo Anthony, another one of my favorite all-time players. I believe he's 8th, 9th all-time in scoring, and he's ringless. And, he's retired now, so it's going to be that way. I love Melo, but, even his number, they gave it to some second-round rookie out of Serbia, and now he's the most iconic number 15 in Denver Nuggets history. It's a shame to see a guy like Carmelo's legacy just kind of fade away over time. And, especially as we go further down the line, it's just going to go more and more into obscurity. And people are always going to bring up Carmelo. He's one of the coldest hoopers of all time. But ultimately, it's a what have you done for me lately league, and what accolades did you bring me to the league? And, no championships, no MVPs. Carmelo, certified Hall of Famer, no doubt. Everybody loves Melo. But his all-time ranking is probably a little bit lower than some people who are fans of him would like to admit, just because of the lack of accolades. And that's largely as a result of his play style. I also want to talk about the Chicago Bulls for a second. Because especially when Lonzo Ball got injured a couple of years ago, their team construction was mainly around two pure bucket getters, Zach LaVine and DeMar DeRozan. And it wasn't very successful. They might fight for a play-in. They might be in the draft lottery. But you're never too far on both ends. You're either a first-round exit, you're either out at the play-in in general, or you're not even getting a high draft pick out of it. So you're just stuck in mediocrity because you built your team around two guys who aren't really going to create for others. They're going to create their own shots. They're going to get their buckets up, but they're not going to be able to hold up other guys around them, and they're not just top tier enough to be able to lead a team themselves by doing that. And when they had Lonzo Ball, it worked out. They were the 1 seed for a while there, back before he got injured. And I'm not the biggest Lonzo Ball fan. I see people say, when he was doing so well in the Bulls, and he was on a 4-year, $80 million contract, we've got a star, and we're only paying him $20 million. Lonzo is not a star, right? But he doesn't need to be. He is a stability point guard. He's going to get you 13 and 5. He's going to play good D. And that's okay. He doesn't need to be a star. You don't need to call him a star. And he doesn't need to be. That's not his role. He made the offense run. The offense did not work well when it was just DeMar DeRozan and Zach LaVine, especially a guy like DeMar. He's more fit for the old era where he doesn't really shoot from the three. He's going to get to his mid-range shots, and a lot of times teams just look to go away from that mid-range, consider the most inefficient shot in basketball. But Lonzo was the stability. He's a great fast break point guard. He's going to lock down on D when a guy like DeMar DeRozan or Zach LaVine isn't necessarily going to do that. And so he was perfect for that team, and it shows to me that you need someone like that. You need someone like that for the Nets as well. I love Dennis Schroeder. I would consider him, I like his game better than Lonzo. My thing, because he plays good defense as well, and he can play make for others. Maybe he's not the best playmaker. He looks for his own shot a little bit more than a guy like Lonzo. But that's another thing about him. He's going to get his buckets too, more than Lonzo Ball does, and he can still dish out a lot of assists. So I love Dennis Schroeder. But he's a little bit more of an erratic point guard over on that Brooklyn Nets team. And he in theory, he fits the bill as a guy that's going to create his own shot for that team and can create shots for others. But you also need some stability in that. Dennis Schroeder, he's a 6'1" slasher. He doesn't space the floor the best. He's at his best when he's going to the rim and he's finding shots for others. And a guy like Lonzo would be a perfect fit for that Brooklyn Nets team. Because I talked about the Brooklyn Nets, yeah, sure, they could use a star that's going to get shots up and get shots up for others. Schroeder just isn't at that level yet. Neither is Lonzo, but Lonzo's a different role entirely. Schroeder plays that role, but he's just, not the best in the league at it. Schroeder's, a borderline starter. I love him to death, but he's just not necessarily what they need the most. Someone like Lonzo, he's going to be able to make shots for others and set up Cam Thomas for success. And then you could have conversations about having maybe a 5-6 seed led by Cam Thomas. I still don't think you're a championship contender, but stability at the point is a huge thing. And a lot of times you just don't have that. And the guys who are going to just be pure bucket getters, they have the ball in their hands a lot. They might, be listed as the point like Bones Hyland. And that's why, in general, it doesn't work out. Cam Thomas, I can make the argument because he's a shooting guard. But in general, yeah, you just can't build around a guy like that. And you need some stability because it can be erratic a lot of times. It can be inconsistent. It can be inefficient. And that's not a recipe for success. And no matter how fun the team is to watch, no matter how many jersey sales you're getting from this player, at the end of the day, success is what's most important. And in an older era in the NBA, you could build around a score-first guy that's going to handle the rock a lot. A guy like Kobe Bryant, go back further, Michael Jordan, Allen Iverson, even though Iverson never won a ring. You were able to build around these guys, and the thing about them, though, is they were able to pass the rock a little bit. Like, they're going to take their shots first and foremost, but they're passing it a lot more than a guy like Cam Thomas. But even then, you had to have really good roster construction around them. Jordan had Pippen and Rodman, and he didn't see much success before Pippen came along. And that's not a knock on Michael Jordan. He's the top 2 player of all time. Many would consider him the greatest of all time. I believe it's a 1A, 1B conversation. You can have 2 right answers for who the GOAT is. But with Michael, he didn't see much success in the playoffs until Scottie Pippen came around. And that's all right, because as a score-first player, they work best when their roster is well-suited to their play style. And that's not a knock on them, because it's out with other guys, too. A guy like Tyrese Halliburton, he's going to need shooters out on the perimeter that he can dish the rock to. That's where he's going to be most successful. Or, Trae Young throwing out lobs. He's going to need some athletic centers who can run out to that rim. So roster construction is super important. But in general, it just seems like in the older era, it was more viable to build around a guy like AI, like MJ, like Kobe Bryant. And, I'm a little bit curious as to why that is. I'm going to try to kind of go into that. And I think it has to do with analytics for the most part. You see all these advanced stats now, everyone's a stat head. Everyone can just go hop on Basketball Reference, look at not just the box score, but the advanced stats and decide, hey, this player is valuable, this player is not valuable, this player, I believe, is overrated. And especially with social media, not only are they going to be able to see those stats, they're going to be able to get that word out about how they feel. And, it's funny because I'm doing this on a podcast right now, but, they're able to voice their opinion, and that can shift the public narrative. Like, you see it all the time. A dude will be considered overrated to the point where he's deemed overrated by everyone, and at that point, he's underrated. Because everyone, he gets posted by the NBA. You go in the comments, they're all hating on the dude and calling him overrated. And at that point, he's not, because everybody does not rock with him. So he becomes underrated. And you just didn't have that back then. You'd see a newspaper article about Michael Jordan dropping some high-scoring game and how the Chicago Bulls just won they just three-peated, right? And I'd say this, I'm a 16-year-old, but I try to just, go back and delve into that stuff. And the score first player was an archetype that worked, I think, largely because the stat heads weren't able to get out there and voice their opinion. Will Michael Jordan be the GOAT in the modern era? I see the argument with LeBron James, how a lot of time he's criticized over stuff that maybe someone like Michael Jordan did too, but MJ wasn't criticized about it because we couldn't get that out to let people know, like, hey, MJ's doing so and so, that is this contributing to winning basketball? But talking about like score first roster construction, Kobe Bryant as well, he was at his best when he had a big that could take some of the load off. Kobe misses a shot. You know who's going to go up there and get that rebound? Shaquille O'Neal. Shaquille O'Neal's going to get that board. Pau Gasol. That's where Kobe found success, was when he had a great big man with him. And that's perfectly fine. The guard-center combo is one of the most sacred duos in basketball. And just in that time period, once again, you were able to get away with that. And I don't think, if you did some of the things that Kobe Bryant did now. And the thing with Kobe is he wasn't the most efficient player. And that's the main thing I want to get into here. The analytics, you can take bad shots. If you make them, it's all right. With Steph Curry is a good example. His scouting reports would always say something about bad shot selection. Steph Curry still does not have that great a shot selection, but if you're making them, it doesn't matter. Steph can pull it from anywhere. There's a chance that's going in. With Paul George, when Damian Lillard hit that game winner on him, he said, that's a bad shot. And yeah, it's a bad shot, but guess what? That shot went in. So in that moment, it's not a bad shot. And the thing with Kobe Bryant was he would take bad shots and he'd make some of them, but he was also pretty inefficient. So I believe if you put him in the modern era, you would see a lot more people that try to discredit Kobe Bryant by saying that he's not that efficient of a player. And so I think that's a big part of it too, just with analytics and social media. People are going to voice their opinion more, and that's going to sway public opinion. It could sway a GM because it can just bring a lot of unnecessary attention to your team. You see like reports get out. Like, I was very surprised when the Clippers signed Kevin Porter Jr. just because of all the PR that comes with that. And you might just see a GM that decides, hey, I don't want to build around this guy just because of the bad press it might get. Maybe he doesn't have a good attitude. Maybe people just don't like his play style. They think he's inefficient. They don't think we can build a winner around him. Even if I believe we can, I don't think it's best for business. And I think that's the part of it too. It's not even old, but the early 2000s was where he was peak. Allen Iverson, he never won a ring. I talked about Carmelo earlier, and part of that is probably due to his play style. And I hate saying that AI is another one of my favorite guys. Like the Hooper is my favorite type of player, who's just going to go out there and get buckets. So I hate to see when they aren't that successful necessarily in terms of accolades. Allen Iverson, everyone can admit how great he is, but a lot of the all-time ranking for a guy like AI, it's pretty low compared to maybe what his statistical production was. And that's just because of how people perceive his impact, his value, and his efficiency to how that correlates to winning basketball. Like Kobe, Iverson wasn't the most efficient player, but Kobe Bryant was able to, win 5 rings. And Iverson did not do that. His best success came in a series against the Lakers where he led Philly to win the first game. And just that lack of, championship success, that brings down Allen Iverson quite a lot in all-time rankings. I think pound for pound, he is one of the greatest basketball players of all time, if not the best. And that's another argument that's made, is that if Allen Iverson was 6'5", it would be over for the league. My thing with that is, if he was 6'5", he wouldn't have played the same way that he did. And so maybe that would have even lessened his impact overall, like as a pop culture icon. Like everybody loves AI. AI was revolutionary. He changed the game. He was the first guy we really saw shooting, dribbling, not just as an obstacle, not being real stiff with the dribbling, but as a guy who can use that to attack a defender. And he's had a style off the court too. The commissioner got in some heat for making guys not dress like Allen Iverson. And so Iverson was just revolutionary. And if Allen Iverson was 6'5", I think his on-the-court play would be a little bit different. He wouldn't have the ball in his hands as much. He might not have been the dribbler that he was. And maybe he would have been a more complimentary piece. He would have been more efficient. And maybe he would have won some rings. But here's the thing about that. If he was like a supporting act, I don't think he would have been as good as he was. So the point I'm trying to make of this one is that sometimes you need a guy like AI or Carmelo who maybe they don't win rings because of their play style. But that's okay because of the way that they make all of us feel as fans. We watch the sport for entertainment at the end of the day. And we're entertained by guys like that a lot of the time. And they're some of the best pure scoring guys you're going to find that just get their shots up no matter the situation and look out for themselves. And a lot of times that's, looked down upon. And people are like, hey, like, if this guy was able to, pass the rock a little bit more, play more complimentary basketball, maybe they would have had some more success. They would have won championships. But if they did that, would we be talking about AI and Carmelo in the same way that we do now? I don't think so. We would see them as great supporting guys. I'm sure they've got all the talent in the world to do that. But they wouldn't have changed the game in the way that they did, especially AI. Carmelo, I don't know. I would say that he changed the game, but he was one of the most important players in the league for a long time there. So that's just another interesting topic for me, is the discussion, like, what if Cam Thomas became a more complimentary player? Because his main attribute is his scoring. So if he was more complimentary, you know what? He would need to improve a lot on the defensive end. He would need to be a better passer. So, a lot of stuff like that. He would just need to become more well-rounded. A guy like Bones Hyland as well, he would need to be a better passer, especially at his height, for sure. So sometimes, you need these guys that are just going to go out and get buckets. And on the level of Iverson or Carmelo, they have to be a starter. But a guy like Bones or Cam Thomas, I think they would thrive best as a six man, like a Jordan Clarkson type. They can start sometimes if the team is lacking in talent, but overall they're going to be best utilized as just a microwave scorer. And that's all right. The league could use some guys like that who are just cold-blooded hoopers. And I think in the right role as like a six-man, that could be a very valuable archetype. It's just sometimes you see it like a Zach LaVine now or an older DeMar DeRozan. A team tries to build around the archetype, and that just doesn't work in the modern NBA anymore unless you're just so good that you can do that. Like a Giannis Antetokounmpo, he's not just a volume scorer. On the offensive end, that's just a bad example. Because Giannis is more of a point forward, if anything. Like, he can handle the ball. Joel Embiid, you give him the rock in the post. And he was, averaging 36 points a night. But you haven't even got much playoff success from him. And Embiid is super efficient. And so, really, it's just an archetype. The pure scorer that doesn't work out that often anymore. But I think it still has its place in the league. And I think it's overall a position that catches too much flack for what it really is and how valuable it can be. You just have to find the right role for it. I think Cam Thomas is in the wrong role. I think Bones could be in a good role if he was actually utilized right. You know who else deserves to be brought up? Jalen Green. Now, here's another thing that differentiates a guy like Lou Williams from a Jalen Green is that Lou Will, he's going to get shots up, but he's not going to get to the rim for those shots. It's the same way with a guy like D'Lo. My biggest issue with D'Angelo Russell is he doesn't really go to the rim to finish that often. And I think he could be so much more effective if he just got a finishing package. That would be peak D'Lo. But a guy like Jalen Green, he's a really athletic finisher as well. So I think he has potential. He is a guy that is a pure scorer that you could build around. I believe that you could build around Jalen Green if he develops well over his next couple of years to become like a more efficient scorer. We saw it at the last couple of weeks of this season when the Rockets were really trying to get in that play-in. Alperen Sengun was injured. Jalen Green was averaging 28 points a night. He was the best player in the league over a 2-week span. And I think if we saw more of that from Jalen, if he was really handed the keys and we weren't hesitant about it and he was more efficient, because he was really efficient down that stretch. He was taking a lot of threes a game and hitting them at a super high clip. He's not going to be as efficient as that, because if he continued on that pace, he would be the greatest shooter of all time. But in general, I think if we saw a more efficient Jalen Green, I think he's a perfect example of what this archetype can be in terms of player that you can build around. Because that's the big thing with it is being able to finish at the rim. A guy like Bones Hyland, he's going to take jumpers instead. And Jalen Green, it opens up the door for 3-level scoring. And a 3-level scorer you were able to build around. It's more a guy like DeMar DeRozan. He finished at the rim, but he's not a 3-point. He's not a sniper from the three. He's in the paint, especially in the mid-range. And that archetype is that's the pure hooper archetype that's really going away now, is a 2-level scorer. You need to be a 3-level scorer if a team's ever going to think about building around you. And one team that's really committed to 3-level scoring, I think it's definitely to their detriment because they don't really have a pure playmaker. It's the Phoenix Suns. They've got Kevin Durant, they've got Devin Booker, and they've got Bradley Beal. And they got Monte Morris now, I think. But last year, I forget, they were the 5 seed or something 5-6 seed. And I think a lot of people just saw the writing on the wall that this team isn't just going to be successful because none of these guys are playing complementary basketball. They all need the ball in their hands, and they all want to make their own shots, and they don't necessarily want to kick it out to others. D-Book's an all-right playmaker, but other than that, KD, he's going to focus on his shot, and Booker's still going to focus on his shot first and foremost, and Bradley Beal especially is. Bradley Beal is another example of a volume scorer that is in a way that it's an archetype that's slowly fading out. He averaged 30 points a game and over one season with the Wizards. I don't know if he was even an All-Star that year. I know he didn't make All-NBA. So you see that. And so the Phoenix Suns just built around multiple scorers like that. And KD, he's an example of the archetype that works like a Jalen Green, who I think has potential to work. KD is a 3-level scorer. And you need to be that to be able to be a pure scorer and still succeed in this league and still have a team even willing to build around you. And he does it efficiently, too. I think that's another big thing. Jalen Green doesn't do it efficiently. Cam Thomas. So there's guys, if you can do it right, it's technically possible, I believe, to build around a pure scorer. But the margin for error is tiny because you've got to be consistent. If you're taking up so many shots, the team is going to live and die by your efficiency. So a guy like Jalen Green, to hit his potential, he has to be more efficient. So I think a lot of it comes in that too. It's technically possible. My bad, audio just cut out. Well, I'm saying, yeah, it's possible to be a pure hooper in the league. But if you're going to do that, there is no margin for error in doing that. So you've got to be one of the best to be able to do that. And a guy like Bones Hyland, a guy like Cam Thomas, I just don't think ultimately you are that best of the best, unfortunately. And it's sad because their play style, they have to be the best of the best if they're going to be the number one option on a team, if they're not going to be relegated just being a six-man. And a lot of times, to make it in this league, you're going to be really confident in your ability. And you think that you are the best, even if you're not. And you just don't reach that margin for error. Maybe you're too inefficient. Maybe you're a 2-level scorer as opposed to a 3. And that's why it doesn't work out with a guy like Bones Hyland, with a guy like Cam Thomas, why they still need to develop parts of their game if they're ever going to properly find a role in this league, and why the pure scorer archetype as a whole is dying is because there's so little margin for error. A team would rather build around a guy like Nikola Jokic who can play make as well, a guy like Tyrese Halliburton, a guy like Steph Curry. And you just don't see the pure hooper being the guy that's built around anymore. It's just, there's no margin for error for it, is the conclusion I've come to today. Man, I didn't come into this with a script. I came into it with nothing. Just kind of ramble about hoops for 30 minutes. If you could, subscribe, follow if you're on Spotify, something like that, I guess it helps with the algorithm, right? I don't know if this pod's ever going to go anywhere, but I love doing stuff like this, just kind of going deep into basketball, kind of getting stuck along the way, and finding our way back to the main point, and drawing a conclusion from the question we originally asked in the first place about why this archetype doesn't work anymore. I love stuff like this. It's been State of the Association. It's been fun. It's been real fun. I'm Nash Roberts. Thank you for listening today. If you enjoyed this video, it would be great if you could find it in you to subscribe, maybe check out the full podcast on Spotify, follow us on there, follow us on Instagram. I know realistically this podcast isn't going to go anywhere ultimately, whether it's via the segments on YouTube or the entire podcast itself. But I want to get into the sports broadcasting business. I want to be able to promote thought-provoking discussions about the NBA, and I would love to do it via State of the Association. Thank you if you made it all the way through.